Okay, this is the face of somebody that just spent the last day and a half only playing Behemoth, and that's all I did. And my eyes are now bleeding, and my brain is now fried, and I'm getting proper disassociation. And I also haven't eaten much today because I've just been playing Behemoth. So we're in a state. But was it worth it is the question that you're probably here to get answered, and the answer is yes. Yes, it was. Before we get into the proper nitty-gritty of this review, a lot of people were worried about this game with early review codes going out, not in a very timely manner, and some reports of it being a buggy mess or an absolute disaster. I'm here to tell you that's not the case. I played the game from start to finish, 100%, it's done. I'm going to be having a full playthrough of the game going up over the next couple of days, consisting of I think 4 episodes, and I've completed the game fully. So I can tell you from start to finish the quality of it, how I enjoyed it, and this is the PSVR2 version of the game. This build was about a month old, so there are some bugs I'm going to talk about that have been fixed in a day 0 patch, or so I've been told. So we won't dwell on it too much, but for the most part, Behemoth is bloody good. This is a proper blockbuster that sets up Skydance for hopefully a generational run of games starting with this one. And to be honest, this might be my VR game of the year. Let's talk about why. Alright, I've got a lot to talk about, so let's tackle this behemoth of a game, pun intended. Now, in terms of spoilers in this video, I will be talking about the game's mechanics in depth and how I found them, but anytime I will talk about, say, the behemoths themselves in terms of more details about them or how many there are or anything like that, I will put a big spoiler warning up, so you'll have ample warning to know, and I'll give you a time code to skip ahead. Same as I did in the Metro review, because I know a lot of you are looking to go into this blind, which is fair enough. All I'll say to you people who want to go into this completely blind, maybe just listen to this episode a bit like a podcast. Put it on in the background, minimize it, because I will be showing gameplay, because, you know, I have to be showing something in the background. And I won't show any endgame content there, but I will be showing some stuff that was shown in the trailers of later on in the game. So if you don't mind about that, feel free to watch and enjoy. If you do mind about that, just minimize me and maybe just listen. One more thing as well is that there is a day 1 patch for the game coming in when it launches on PSVR2, basically fixing a bunch of stuff like interactions with levers and doors and some pop-in, which is kind of prevalent in my playthrough. There was a bit of pop-in, it wasn't like massive chunks of the earth, but it was noticeable here and there. And there were 1 or 2 enemies that did spawn in the floor and then fix themselves, but those are fixed in the day 1 patch because the build I'm playing today is a month old. Okay, with that being said, let's actually dig into the meat of Behemoth. So, Behemoth puts you in the shoes of Wren. His village has been corrupted by the rot, and he has to go out into the wider world, fight the behemoths, and cure it. He'll have the aid of a couple other characters on the way, and as you go, you'll be questioning who you can really trust. I found that the story was a little predictable in 1 or 2 areas, but the rest of it genuinely did surprise me, and it had me gripped all the way through. As opposed to this, for example, when I was playing through Saints and Sinners, I did enjoy the story elements of Saints and Sinners, but it wasn't what kept me going, it wasn't really driving me. In Saints and Sinners, the story of that was more of a backdrop for me to do whatever I wanted in that sandbox. Here with Behemoth, this is a narrative. You're going through levels, and even though you do have the option to return to previous stages that you've been to with your map, what you're really doing is just progressing onwards all the time, with a central hub area that you come back to every couple of hours, just for a little bit, and then you're on to your next location. So this is a big departure from Saints and Sinners in structure-wise in the narrative. Overall though, I really like the story, it has a nice ending, and I won't spoil how, but it does leave a little bit of room for Behemoth the sequel, if they feel so inclined, which after playing the game, hell yes, they should do that. On a visual level, Behemoth is incredible. Minus those pop-in issues that I talked about that will be fixed on day 1 if they keep their promises that they've given to us. Visually, it's stunning. The lighting is fantastic, the massive vistas you get to see genuinely are breathtaking, and scale is a big thing here. Not just with the behemoths themselves, but also with massive structures, castles, and buildings that you come across that truly blow you away. Even though I played this game in 2 back-to-back sittings for quite a long time and my retinas were burnt out by the end of it, in the final stretch of the game I was still looking at vistas and thinking, Wow, that looks fantastic, and it takes a lot for my burned eyeballs after that long in VR to really be wowed by something, but they were. That being said, the quality is a little bit inconsistent between assets. This is few and far between, but there are certain assets like the keyhole indoors and some statues which look a little bit low res. I don't know whether that's a pop-in issue that they didn't just load in, or whether the models are just that level of resolution. I'm not sure, but again, those are few and far between. For the most part, 99% of the time the game looks bloody fantastic. It runs at a smooth 90 Hz. I had no drops or crashes throughout my entire playthrough. Everything went perfectly smoothly, which I'm very happy with. Okay, I actually had an entire haptic section recorded here, but I've had to re-record it because I think my build is a little old on this and they hadn't included it in the patch notes, because essentially head haptics and adaptive triggers were not in my build, which initially I was really disappointed by, because in my earlier session in February I chatted with the lead dev and he said he really wanted to implement them with the team into the game, and I was quite sad in my build. In the final product it's not there, but it is. Sony have just put out a trailer about Behemoth advertising the adaptive triggers for the grappling hook and headset haptics when you get hit and when behemoths walk by. So it seems to be in the final build of the game. Hopefully for you guys, you'll have to report back on that one, because this is recorded in the past. This build didn't have it, but I'm assuming the final build will have it. As for haptics in my build though, sword fights feel really good in the controllers, and it feels detailed and nice. For example, if you drag two blades over each other, you can feel them kind of have that friction between them like they would in real life. But yeah, overall for head haptics I can't really comment on because they weren't in my build, and adaptive triggers weren't, but they should be in the final one. As for accessibility, Skydance were always pretty good with this, and yeah, that shows here too. Everything that you'd really want with smooth turning, snap turning, smooth movement, teleport movement, blinders on, if you want that, then it's all there. Although this will be quite an intensive game, especially with the larger than life battles you'll be undertaking. I know one particular viewer asked me before this about one-handed support. From what I can tell, I don't think there's really anything to accommodate that, which kind of sucks. So if you are looking for that, unfortunately from what I can see, doesn't seem to be supported. A lot of actions in this game rely on you using both hands either at the same time to do two different things or at the same time to do one task, so unfortunately not. Capping us off here, the voice acting and sound design is pretty fantastic. The voice acting I'd put on the same tier as Saints and Sinners, and it's good enough so that when the battles happen or the emotional moments hit, they really do feel proper. Some VR games can really fall flat on the voice acting, not the case here. Sound design though, great. The music as well is pretty bloody good. Being the soundtrack to your scaling of the massive behemoths and your battles with the small foot soldiers, each clash and scrape of swords and stomp of the behemoth's feet are really felt. The audio design is up there. Now for the whole game, it took me about 7 hours and 5 minutes, I think was my final run time for the entire thing. You definitely can take longer with this. I did take my time and try and explore in certain areas, but definitely towards the end, there were 100% areas that I did not see. So to be honest, I think with the arena mode, which we'll get into in a bit included, and the main campaign, if you really took your time, on the hardest difficulty as well maybe, that would take you the advertised 12 hours, I would say. I played on normal, and I was on a time constraint playing this, but I did try and take my time, and yeah, landed at about 7 hours and 10 minutes, and it felt like a well fleshed out and enjoyable campaign. As a bit of a note here as well, I'm sure some other reviewers will get longer run times too. I was on the lower side of the run times for Metro. I don't know whether I just go through games fast, even though I do try to explore, but that's just something to keep in mind. Your journey through the Forsaken Lands will give you a lot of weapons to use as well, like swords, axes, daggers, bows. And as you go through the game, you'll get special weapons that grant you different abilities and different ways to take down behemoths. That's about all I'll say about those special weapons. I don't want to spoil them for you, but they're really fun to use and they look awesome, and you can upgrade them as you go with a sick blacksmithing system that actually makes you hammer down the molten metal into your weapons, which is amazing. Really satisfying to use, and you collect these resources from vases and boxes around the maps as you progress. The combat is very parry focused. You'll block and parry against enemies, stagger them and hit back, or use your dodge. It feels as close to a Souls-like as we're really going to get in VR, and you can tell the devs really loved games like Elden Ring and Dark Souls with the enemy design and with the combat design here. Overall combat feels visceral and punchy, and the gore is magnificent in the most horrendous way possible. When you engage your strength boost, which we'll talk about in a second, you can slice through enemies in any way that you want, and it is disgusting. I distinctly remember the end of a boss fight where I went absolutely psycho on the boss, and as they died, I kept cutting, and suddenly they were in about 7 pieces in front of me. It is grim in the best way possible. Now, this strength buff does have a lore reason to be in the game, but essentially you press your right trigger and Wren gets a big boost in his strength, and as you'll explore you'll find environmental assets that give you upgrades to this system. So for example, a little ways through the game I engaged the strength boost, and because of an upgrade that I got, my speed was increased while it was active. So it can give you a lot of different buffs, but the main one is to be able to really cut through enemies. That's where the combat really got its hooks into me, I think, is that when the strength buff isn't active, you feel really on edge. You're powering everything you can and you're being really cautious because the combat is actually fairly hard. However, when you engage that strength boost, even though your health still is pretty much the same, you now have that confidence to cut through enemies and slice through them with ease, and you feel like an absolute powerhouse. It's that balance of being a glass cannon in the story and in the combat that makes all the fighting feel really good here. You also have a grapple hook to swing, pull objects, and take down enemies, and this will also get upgrades as you go, which you'll find throughout the levels. The grapple hook is great, the physics are fantastic, and there are fairly rudimentary puzzles to solve. They're not too hard, but they are fun because of the grapple hook and the way it operates. It interacts properly with the world, and it's a really neat feature that's used well and a lot. You can use the grapple hook in combat as well to pull enemies towards you or off cliffs, or grapple their weapons off them, leaving them defenseless. It's a really cool implementation and not a gimmick. The game has the same stamina and health system really as Saints and Sinners, and you can definitely feel that this is a Skydance game. From the way your arms protrude out your body, to picking up items and managing these health and stamina systems, this is a Skydance game through and through, and you can feel that DNA. The stamina system though is not reliant on sprinting like it is in Saints and Sinners, it's just reliant on combat. So if you overswing too much, you'll get tired and won't be able to swing properly. Like in Saints and Sinners, when you get melee weapons and you swing too much or sprint too much, your arms start to get really heavy. It's the same here. This is to encourage you to parry properly and not just swing wildly like a madman, which can be the downfall of some VR games, looking at you Skyrim VR. So, stamina system, pretty damn good, and allows you to be strategic in combat and run away when you need to. Health is pretty simple. As you go through the game, there are herbs you can find. You can't store these, but they do just restore a bit of health, and there are pouches. You can store up to 4 of these in your inventory at one time and quick draw them to gain some health back. You'll get upgrades to your health and stamina as you go as well, to allow things to become a little bit easier for you and to scale with the enemies that are thrown at you. All of this is managed with your inventory system, which is a scroll on your chest, which is awesome. Really good implementation, and this will allow you to see your map to fast travel between areas if you do want to backtrack at all and explore a little bit, and will allow you to choose the upgrades that you want. Okay, well that's all well and good, but what about the human enemies that you'll be fighting in the game? These vary in size and vary in the way that they attack you with the weapons that they're wielding, and all of them feel really distinct. For example, you'll have archers, axemen, swordsmen, 2 knife-wielding people, and there are a couple of factions you fight throughout the game which feel really distinct. I was worried that each of the enemy factions would feel a little bit reskinned, as there are 3 areas that you mainly travel through in the game, and each of them have these different factions in them. But luckily they don't. Of course they are all human, so they do feel a little bit similar, but they have strengths and weaknesses that are different from each other, such as an immunity to headshots with arrows for one faction, and an affinity for handheld fighting in another faction. For example, the axemen are absolutely terrifying and will sprint at you with an axe in their shield, but the knife-wielding enemies are a little bit sneaky and might stay in the shadows and try and attack you without you realizing. Each of these factions have lore as to why they are who they are, and these can be found in little collectibles, which are skulls and scrolls around the map. That are essentially voice logs that will give you some insight into why they are like this. I found myself wanting to learn more about this world, and that's always a good sign. Enemies though are varied enough and they don't outstay their welcome. There are some special human bosses as well. I won't spoil all these or anything, but they are a step up from the normal enemies and are distinct from one another, and are genuinely fun to fight, each with their own varied attack patterns and weapons. After you take one down as well, you can add their helmet to your collection in your main hub, which we talked about earlier, and you can carry their weapons with you if you'd like to. I should probably touch on the weapon storage system as well. It's similar to Saints and Sinners with over the shoulder and by your hips. However, if you hold triangle or circle, you also have alternate slots, so really you have 8 slots instead of your normal 4 that you might in a different game, say Saints and Sinners. So that's very, very cool. Human bosses though have awesome introductions for each of them, some of which genuinely really surprised me, and I was a bit worried that these bosses would feel like filler between the big behemoth fights, but no, they are cool in their own right, which is good. I'll briefly touch on the arena mode here as well, because honestly there's not too much to tell. It's a lot of fun. Essentially in the main menu you'll see arena mode in brackets with a beta. That essentially loads you into exactly an arena, where once you hit the big gong in the middle of the map, enemy waves will start and they'll become more numerous and angry as time goes on. You've got to fend off and fight them until you die. That's pretty much it at the moment, hence why I guess it's in beta. The devs have said it will receive updates going into the future. As it is, it's perfectly fun, and honestly on its own is one of the more polished melee fighting experiences on PSVR2, which is great. But in the future, yeah, Skydance have said it'll get numerous free updates, no charge at all for the player, so that's great to hear. Okay, I guess we should talk about it now. We are quite a few minutes into this review, so the main thing you're here for, the behemoths. Now we're going to tackle this spoiler-free first, and then we're going to talk a little bit spoilery, but that's only for people who really want to be sold on the game and kind of want to know what they're getting themselves into. So the spoiler-free section, let's tackle first. The behemoths themselves, visually, are fantastic. I actually said this in my playthrough, and you'll see that in the episodes that come out over the next couple of days, that I really want an art book of this game and kind of a making of, because each of the behemoth designs are so unique and awesome. There are 3 main behemoths in the Forsaken Lands to fight, and aside from looking very different and being different sizes, each have very different gameplay styles. They each escalate in their tension and spectacle, and the boss fights are very reminiscent of Shadow of the Colossus. If you like that game or that style and want something like that in VR, then this game has you covered. There are genuine moments that feel like they've been lifted straight out of that game and planted into this, but in VR, and it's actually you doing it. My jaw was on the floor during some of the finales of these fights because of the amount of incredible spectacle that was happening around me. I'm genuinely really excited to show them off in the gameplay videos and show my reactions to them because they are that cool. That being said, they are fairly difficult in some points and require a lot of clambering and precision, so some of them genuinely took a fair amount of time, and I imagine on hard as well, it's going to be a real challenge to take these guys down. The build up to the behemoths as well is a good while. There are 3 main biomes throughout the game, and each of them will build up slowly to the behemoth reveal. You'll hear rumblings, you'll see it go overhead maybe, and get more glimpses of it until it's finally time to take it on, and that's a brilliant way of introducing them and building up to the main fight. The main takeaway from the behemoths though is that every time you see one, you have that thought of, how the fuck am I supposed to take this thing down? And I think that's the main feeling that the Skydance devs wanted to capture here, and they really nailed it. Especially towards the largest behemoth in the game. Looking at that genuinely felt like an impossible task, and pulling it off feels so good. That's about all I'll say on like spoiler-free stuff, because I don't want to spoil everything to you guys in terms of the mechanics of how to fight them. I want you guys to go in blind and simply enjoy these for yourself, which kind of sucks for me because I want to gush about it, but I guess I'll wait a few seconds for the spoiler section for that. But yeah, please, if you're planning on playing this game without looking at anything, just go in and do so. You're not going to be disappointed by the sheer spectacle of these things. I have never seen anything like this in VR before. Right, for those of you who aren't completely sold on Behemoth and want to know a bit more about the fights, including a spoiler that kind of ties to the story, so please be aware of that. Even though I won't spoil that entire plot point, it does kind of reveal something about the end of the game. We're heading into the spoiler territory now, so let's talk. Okay, now that we're in spoiler territory, there are 3 main behemoths that are advertised in the trailers here. But to be completely transparent, if you do not care about spoilers for the story of this game and just want to know about pure content, there is a 4th at the end of the game. All I will say is though, for the people who are really excited for this and do not know about this, do not go spreading this and telling them because it will ruin the surprise. But yes, that is the case. There is a final boss fight aside from the 3 they've shown in the trailers. So you're getting a fair bit of content here with 4 main areas split up throughout the campaign. 3 overworld areas, and then 1 final area that is a little bit more mystic and feels really cool to be in. Each of the fights have different attributes to them and lasted me anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes. It's that wide of a breadth really, especially with the final one as it drags on for a fair bit longer between stages. Genuinely, these feel like a mix between Shadow of the Colossus and a Souls-like boss, and they involve you climbing up just like Shadow of the Colossus and stabbing certain weak points and then delivering the final blow on the behemoths, with gameplay elements that vary between them. Like for example, for the first one, you dodge the big flying mace. For the second bat one, you cover your ears for its screeching. For Dread Stag, the last huge one, you utilize your grappling hook and tether to bring it down. And then for the final boss of the game, all of these gameplay elements really come together. Okay, that's pretty much all I want to say about spoilers, to just be completely transparent about content there. So let's get back to the non-spoilery stuff. So all the boss fights in general are pretty damn fantastic. I felt engrossed in every single one, and they are simply a spectacle you need to see for yourself. So that's Behemoth. From me, I really enjoyed this one. It's exactly what I imagined it would be. It lived up to the hype, and I am bearing the consequences of enjoying it so much that my eyes are now burning and my arms are incredibly dead. But it was 100% worth it. Of course, there were some issues with pop-in and a couple of bugs with enemies spawning where they shouldn't have been, and you need to kill these enemies to progress, so it could be a little bit wonky, but That apparently is fixed in the day 0 patch on PSVR2 at least, so that should be fine for you guys. There were a couple instances where the climbing was a little bit iffy, but I only noticed them because, well, they happened and the rest of the time it was fine. If it works, you don't notice it at all, but if it doesn't work, it really stands out, and that is indeed the case here. In terms of progress-wise though, it didn't really set me back too far. I would just fall down and have to climb up again, or I'd catch myself, so it's not too big of a deal. But that is worth mentioning. Overall though, Behemoth is seriously fantastic. I absolutely love this game from start to finish, and if this is the precedent and the quality that Skydance is setting for the future, then count me in, because I'll be there every single time. They have cemented themselves further as an absolute giant in the VR scene, and I cannot wait to see what they come out with next. Anyway, please let me know if you're excited for Behemoth. Have you picked it up? Have you already played it? Because I think it should be out today, but I don't know when. Or maybe it is now. My mind is broken right now. But thank you all so much for watching today. Thank you to our patrons and YouTube members. Without them, none of this would have been possible. And thank you for Skydance for sending over a review key of this one, so I could get this over to you guys as soon as possible. Please tune in to the full playthrough over the next few days. That would be much appreciated, but thank you so much, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye bye.